We are totally casual here on this
Cool.
on this podcast. But I'm gonna start and I'm gonna hit you with some of these hard hitting questions.
Do it.
Hey, there's a chick on my app.
Right, I'm just saying women aren't meant to fight. You have tiny, hollow bones.
Don't you think you're doing a lot of genderizing?
What?
Don't be a pussy. Join Cobra Kai.
I was a natural cobra.
I'm here with Matt Lewis, and you play the All Valley Under 18 Karate Tournament president, Ron. Right?
Correct. That is I.
Right? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
For the longest time, my family was calling you the committee director. And then I was listening to Cobra Kai Companion, and you clarified on there it was president. And I was like,
yeah.
I've been wrong for 2 years. Like, I gotta get this right. But yeah, hitting you with the fastball right away.
Okay.
Your thoughts, colors of the mats, changing them. What is your opinion?
You know, I really think if it were left up to me, if it were left up to Ron, we would have stayed with the traditional red mats, white fists. However, Daryl's ability to evolve the design really did bring people in. So I guess I have to concede that he was right at that time.
Fair enough. Now,
yeah.
Not only are we conceding that maybe he was right, but I thought there was some really interesting writing going on there. Did you notice the significance of that changing of the color? Did you pick up on kind of what that could potentially mean for the series?
No, but you're smarter than I am. So what is it?
I'm a big English person, so there's a lot of foreshadowing going on there. I was watching it for the first time and I was like, oh, changing of the color, like a turning point, a changing of the guard, like maybe Cobra Kai is going to win this thing. Like, we're gonna, new colors, new tournament champions, Cobra Kai, like back. So I kind of thought maybe we would be seeing Cobra Kai win, like during that episode. That for me was like a big, like when you're reading a book, when you kind of notice like the turning point. That was when I noticed it. I was like, oh, like this is going Johnny's way.
That's really smart. And I could totally see how you could pick up on that. When we were, anytime that I've gone in to shoot for Cobra Kai, they'll give us the script for that episode, but we don't get the other episode scripts. So especially for season 1, I got to read episode 7 because I was in that, and then didn't get to see another script until 10. And so, of course, when I read that script, I knew that Cobra Kai was going to win. I was very disappointed. But then again, I was like, well, shit, the show's called Cobra Kai, so it makes sense. But there were so many other things that happened over the course of season 1 that I just didn't know about until we both knew about it when it aired. So like I had gleaned some things by being able to read those 2 episodes, but as far as like really understanding the entire trajectory of season 1 or any other season, it was a surprise to me too. But yeah, that totally makes sense. That's smart.
It's funny that you say you weren't rooting for Cobra Kai. Now, I know you're a Karate Kid fan, like tried and true from the beginning, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So what was, the significance of those movies when you first saw them? And how did that change now being a part of the universe?
Well, answering you backwards, being able to be part of the Karate Kid / Cobra Kai universe is just mind-blowing. And I've had conversations with the other committee members and other people on the show. It's like, part of my line of work is to, work with famous people, right? So, like I did an episode of Ozark, and I got to meet Jason Bateman and Laura Linney and some other people on the show. And that's just sort of like one of the perks of the job. So if I had done, if I had like a scene with Ralph Macchio and something else, that would have been really cool. But like, especially, episode 7 of season 1, like seeing the Karate Kid and Johnny Lawrence as themselves, like right in front of me, that was insane. And if you look at that episode, there's a moment, I'm so glad that they used that take, and it made its way in, because I think it was maybe the first take. But when Daniel comes into the room, he walks up to me and pats me on the shoulder and calls me Ron and sits down beside me. And I've just got this huge, like, shit-eating grin on my face because the Karate Kid just pat me on the shoulder and sat next to me. So, it's still astounding. Life is weird. It's not something that I would have expected in a million years. And it's just such a blessing. And I love the show so much. I'm a huge fan. And one of the reasons because of that is that the summer of 1984, when Karate Kid came out, that was the first time that my family had moved to a new state. And we moved at the beginning of the summer. So my dad got a new teaching job. And there weren't any kids like right around my immediate area in the neighborhood. So we moved to this new place at the beginning of the summer. And then I was pretty lonely like the whole summer until school started, and I met some kids and made some friends. But that was the summer that Karate Kid came out, and I went and saw it. And this is 84, so it's not like you couldn't look stuff up on YouTube. There was no like secondary experiences that you could have with something that you were really fond of. You just kind of had to remember it. And like, that's about it. But I got the soundtrack on vinyl, and so I taped the soundtrack onto a cassette tape, and then I had like my big Walkman with the shoulder strap, and I just rode my bike around all summer and listened to that soundtrack and thought about the movie. And watching Daniel have like a similar experience was pretty cool. And then I got to tell Ralph that when we met doing season 1, episode 7. And then we came back for 10, and I was a wimp and I didn't do what I wanted to do. But when I came back for season 3, I still have that album, and I brought it in, and Ralph signed it for me, which was really special. And so it's hanging on the wall in my office now. Prized possession.
That's so cool. So cool.
Yeah,
You
it was
can't
really
play it anymore now, though. Now it's memorabilia for sure. But
true.
you can always get another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Vinyls are coming back for sure.
Oh yeah.
I know a ton of kids. I have a record player. I have vinyls. Yeah, it's so awesome that you grew up with it. I always wish I'd grown up with it. I wish I grew up in the 80s, like the music, the culture, everything, like, oh, so much. I'll say it, like, so much better than today. Like, I love that.
It was a simpler time in a lot of ways.
I could have used a simpler time. I just started using TikTok for the first time. My high school age sister and my brother were showing me how to use TikTok over the quarantine period. And as a communications major, it was something that I felt like was important that I learn.
Sure.
Holy crap, I don't get it. I'm 21 and I don't get it. And that's upsetting to me. Like, I feel like I should get it. But I don't know. I grew up.
There's a lot of stuff about social media that I don't. I mean, I use it, but there's sort of like I use it on like sort of a baseline middle-aged person level. But then there are things like, I'm on Instagram, but I don't know how to do all the animations and the stuff to put it in my stories or whatever. And so a lot of times I'll do interviews like this, and then they're like, all right, here's this thing, share it to your story. And I'm like, I forget who it was, but a couple of interviews ago, somebody had to teach me how to do it. I was like, I'll do it, but I don't know how. He was like, okay, you see the little airplane, click on that. It's like that kind of thing.
I wish I could try to help you, but I learn as I go. Like, I go in with a lot of confidence. I tell everybody I know how to do everything. And like you just saw, I was like, oh yeah, like Zoom, totally. And then I was like, I've never been the admin before. Like, what?
Sure.
I just roll with it. I pretend like I know what I'm doing. And people think that I do.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, but for me, I mean, I didn't get to see the Karate Kid until, I saw it on DVD, or I think actually on VCR.
Sure.
I was little. And my dad just like sat me down and he was like, these are the important movies in your life. They're going to influence you. And it was Karate Kid, Star Wars, Rocky. And I will tell you, they've all influenced my life like crazy, but none so like the Karate Kid. Because
your dad's a brilliant man.
I watched it when I was 6. I enrolled in karate like 2 weeks later, and I got it was the next 8 years of my life. So
Nice.
it was like super important to me. But for you, like being now in the universe, do you go back and are you a fan of the Cobra Kai series? Do you watch it like a fan?
Absolutely. I watch it all the time. My wife makes fun of me because a lot of times what will happen is that, we've got two little kids. And so we'll get them down and put them to bed and stuff. And my wife gets up super early. I'm a night owl. She's an early bird. She gets up at like 5:30 in the morning, goes to the gym. So, she'll hit the sack pretty early usually. So that means that I've got like a couple of hours to have the house to myself and, watch a little TV and whatever. And it happens so many times. I'll just flip around and there's nothing on. And then I'll flip around Netflix and there's nothing on. And then next thing I know, I'm halfway through a season of Cobra Kai again, because it's a great show. I really enjoy it. I just think it's so, it's just so uniquely made. I mean, the source material is important to me, but more than that, it's just the way that they're able to take really dramatic situations and really comedic situations and find this like really perfect balance. And they also will throw you for a loop quite a bit in a lot of different ways. I mean, sometimes it's just like they did this in season 3 a lot, where you're like expecting something to happen, but then they'll flip the script on you and it's not what you thought it was going to be,
Yeah.
But then more than that, sometimes you think that it's going to be a serious scene, or it is a serious scene, but then it ends with like a really comedic button, or something like that. I love the show so much. I'm such a fan.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a fan as well. And I've talked about this a lot with a lot of different fans, but my favorite part about it is that there have been so many reboots and revampings of shows in the past few years. And this show like does its job really well in creating a new cast of characters that you are really caring about and investing in, but also really continuing the journey of the original characters that made you care about it in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And it's
they ride that line.
It's a lot like, yeah. I think that especially when it first came out, I haven't been on Stranger Things yet, but I've auditioned for it quite a few times over the years. And I remember getting auditions for season 1, and really like the first couple of times, because they'll give you a little breakdown, and I sort of read through it and was like, the breakdown said something about like the Duffer Brothers, and I was like, well, that's weird. These two guys call themselves the Duffer Brothers. That's a little over the top, but whatever. And then I kept reading. It was like, it's going to be a mashup of 80s tropes. It's going to be like Goonies meets E.T. meets, Footloose, or what. I was like, this sounds awful. And, obviously I was completely wrong. But in that vein, Cobra Kai does a lot of that too. It's really subtle, but they'll take elements from, the original films. And then, next thing you know, you're, watching the kids skateboard up to the dojo, and they're playing this like 90210 music. And they really lean into 90210 and shows like that quite a bit. And just sort of like mash it up together in like this new interesting thing, which I just think is really smart, really cool.
Yeah, you talk about auditions. Can you tell me what your audition process was like for Cobra Kai?
It's really like a kind of turn and burn kind of thing. Usually what happens for not just Cobra Kai, but for any audition, I'll get a couple of pages. It might be 12 or 15 pages. A lot of times it's like 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 or something like that. It might be one scene. It might be 2 or 3. Depends on the size of the role and stuff like that. But, usually I'll get that, and then they want me to tape my performances through those scenes. So I'll be set up something like this. I'll just have somebody standing on the other end of the camera reading all of the other voices, and I'll just do my part. And then I've got to send that off pretty quickly. So a lot of times, I just did one today that's due at noon tomorrow. So it wasn't even a 24-hour turnaround. Usually it's like 2 or 3 or 4 days. They give you some time, but you just sort of got to I don't know. The thing with working on camera really is that the camera has less imagination than the theater does. I do theater too. I don't do it as much as I used to because I've been working on camera more, and it's the schedule gets really complicated. But with theater, like I could play Hamlet, you could play Hamlet. They would both be great productions, but they would also be very, very different, you know?
I don't know about that
but it happens all the time. I mean, you know, especially with older plays like that. But with on camera, really what you've got to do is just sort of channel yourself and just put yourself in those circumstances of the character. That might include adding a dialect or something like that. But it's really just sort of the essence of me saying the words and participating in the scene. That was a really long answer for your question, but
No, I like long
really just like learn the words, say them in an interesting way. That's kind of it.
Well, I mean, this one obviously worked out for you. You got to spend a lot of time with Ralph Macchio, who is gotta be the coolest person I think I've ever.
Ralph and Billy, and everybody else on the show. But I don't want to get sidetracked. Ralph and Billy are both so kind and so cool and so grounded. And it's been my experience quite often, and it's definitely the case with these guys, that the longer you've been in the business and the more famous you are, usually the kinder and the more grounded that actor is. And when I say actor, I mean men and women. It's become sort of a gender neutral term these days. There's no actor, there's no lawyeresses, there's no doctresses. So actress is sort of falling to the wayside. So they're both awesome. If we're talking about Ralph specifically, I think that the coolest thing about him is that he has a lot of ownership of the show. I mean, you can just sort of, he's the Karate Kid, but he's also like an executive producer, and he's really involved in everything. And he's also just like a really seasoned veteran. So when he's there, I think it's the closest, and especially like with season 3, when I got to spend time with him at Mr. Miyagi's house, between being at the Miyagi-Do dojo and being with Ralph there, that was about as close to feeling the spirit of Pat that I think we possibly could. And he's really he holds a lot of reverence for the films and for Pat Morita. He's not just like clocking in to make some money. Like, this is something that's still really, really important to him. But they're all so cool. Courtney is so cool. She's hilarious. All the kids are so kind. I know a lot of their parents, especially the local Atlanta kids. So it's just like this. It's a great set to be on. It's just one big family, which is really awesome.
Yeah, that sounds so amazing. I mean, Courtney and Ralph are my Long Island homies for life, representing. That's why I particularly asked you about Ralph, because I mean, all the time growing up, you would hear, oh, like Ralph Macchio was here today, or he was there today. And I was like, oh yeah, like I was there 3 days ago. Like, oh, I did that. Like, oh, a Mets game? Oh yeah, like I've been there. Like, yeah. And it always it felt so cool. So now seeing him back, this heavily in the spotlight for my generation to know all about him is very cool. Like, represent Long Island, Ralph. Like, let's go.
And for both of them to be able to, to your point, for both of them to be able to get, modern recognition, and they're both like such great actors. It's amazing. It's a crime that Billy hasn't won an Emmy for his work. I mean, Ralph's role is I think a little more straightforward. But the show's called Cobra Kai. It's really about, the trajectory of Johnny. And there are just so many. I was talking to a friend of mine a couple of years ago when season 1 came out, and there's a moment where he's got so many great moments in every scene. But there's when he's in episode 7 with us, and he makes this speech about how Cobra Kai is important to him and how it's changed him a little bit. He's got this close up at the end, and you could see him sort of like kind of well up with tears a little bit, but then he like sucks the tears back in somehow. I mean, it's just there's so many cool little things that he does. He's such a compelling actor to watch.
Yeah, Johnny Lawrence doesn't cry. Come on, man. Like, no. He's no pussy.
Rewatch the scene. You'll see it. He gets a little. He gets a little emotional.
I saw. It was very, very sweet, and it was again one of those moments where I was like, "Oh, I'm rooting for Johnny. Like, what is happening?" Right. And you were in a very important scene where Daniel really does kind of look like the bad guy a little bit. Like he looks like he's being really insensitive to this guy who's really keeping it together. And again, I'll say it again, like it was such a turning point. It was one of those moments where you're like, maybe Daniel wasn't always like, maybe we're only seeing one side of the story here. Like watch the original movie, there's a lot more going on in this guy's life. And it's my favorite part about the show. Give me a good character arc in a book, a movie, a TV show. I'm hooked. That's it. That's all you need to get me on board.
Well, and they're both really flawed men that have lost father figures, both of them. And I mean, I think really that's the thing that unites them, is because they're so similar. They're so similar. That's why they hate each other so much. And that's like a family dynamic too. There are a lot of times like, a father and a son or a mother and daughter will be so, I had a relationship like that with my dad to a certain extent. We get along great now, but growing up, we were so much the same that we just sort of butted heads a lot because we were just too similar. And so I think that's something that happens with them too.
Yeah, I get that on a real level. I understand. But I mean, like, is there anything, for the people listening, like, is there anything you can tell us that happened, behind the scenes, a funny moment, a really important, something that happened that, meant a lot to you that we just don't get to see?
I think in general, there was just like a pinch me, I'm dreaming sort of thing. And, when you're filming like that, those are long days, a lot of times like 12, 13, 14, 16-hour day. And especially when we were shooting the tournament at the end of season 1, we were, the whole committee was there for the whole week. We just had that one little scene in episode 1, I meant episode 10. We just had that little scene in episode 10, but because we were we were judging the tournament or whatever, we were there for the whole week. So shooting episode 7 was amazing because it was our first time there. And there were times when myself and the other committee members, like in between takes, would just be sitting in our chairs waiting to get called back in. We'd sort of look at each other like, is this real? Like, this is nuts. And they had, cast chairs for us to sit in. They were all Cobra Kai chairs, except for Daniel's. His was a Miyagi-Do chair. But of course, this was, episode 7. This is before we even knew that there was actually like Miyagi-Do existed, so there was just sort of like this, it was just mind blowing, and then being there for the tournament and like turning around and like, I'm sitting behind the big scoreboard thing from the movies. And I mean, it was just, again, just so crazy. And then for season 3, I got to spend a lot of time hanging out with Ralph and Courtney because we were filming together, and that was just a joy. I do remember the director, her name is Jen Salata, and she was very nice. And we were filming, and she came up to me and was like, "Hey, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming back." I went back and watched her stuff from season 1. It was hilarious. And she was just really nice and just wanted to chat a lot. So we just talked about stuff. Talked about how awesome the show was. She directed a handful of episodes. And then, and I just kept thinking like, man, her name sounds really familiar. And then a couple of days later, I had been reading this book about the making of the Office, the American Office. And she was a producer and a writer and directed a bunch of episodes. And she was like really heavily involved in the American Office. I'm kind of really glad I didn't realize that until after we shot, because I might have been a little more rigged up and nervous because I love The Office too. And then one other thing I can remember is that I was standing with Ralph and Courtney in the Miyagi-Do backyard, and we were, waiting to go again. And Courtney, I guess, yeah, Courtney asked him something about the Outsiders, and he just started telling us all this really cool shit about the Outsiders, and you could tell that it was, it was his first big break, so it's still really important to him, and he wanted to talk about it. And of course, I can't really remember anyone's names, but he was telling me about how Coppola had like all these other people that had auditioned for the Outsiders, his young teen contemporaries, and these other actors that were like up for roles, but the other actor got it instead. And he's maintained a relationship with S.E. Hinton, who wrote the book over the years. And then Ralph like talked about that for like 5 minutes and then walked off. And then Courtney and I just looked at each other like, that dude just told us about the Outsiders for 5 minutes straight. Like that's pretty awesome, So
you're drinking lemonade, but you got all the tea. That's what I'm
exactly.
That's what I'm hearing.
Wow.
Oh, my millennial humor. Wow. Oh my goodness. But yeah, you talk about your return in season 3. I was so happy to see you back. You come crashing into the dojo. You're like, yo, this thing, it's over. Like, not happening. Yeah. But I mean, I found it so funny how everybody just seems to just walk into Miyagi-Do. No knocking. Everybody just ends up in the backyard. No questions asked. Do we just?
I mean, we had actually talked about that a little bit, and Ralph would goof around in between takes because that scene is sort of split up into 2 sections. So there's like that first part where I come in and say hi to him. He says hi to me, and then I say, "Hey, there's something wrong with the tournament." And then it cuts to Eagle Fang in the park. So when we were shooting that first little part, they would yell "cut," and then Ralph would be like, "How did you find my house?" Or he would just he kept throwing in little ad libs just to goof off. But I mean, I don't know. At the same time, like, it is a place of business, and the kids roll in there all the time. So I sort of justified it that Ralph and Amanda, or Daniel and Amanda and I, are close. I've had a close professional relationship with Daniel for a long time, so I can walk in their house.
Sounds good enough to me. No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the internet about Ron and how he just seems to walk in there, and I'm like, no, everyone seems to just walk in there. Like,
right.
Kreese was there and no one knew. Like, how
exactly.
did he get in there? How does everybody get in there? But I mean, you mentioned, you got State Farm as a sponsor for this All Valley. Right. What's happening there? I mean, we got the All Valley to happen. Are we going to see some State Farm logos plastered all over this tournament in season 4?
I don't know. No idea. Yeah.
That's it. Nothing. No comment. No, I thought it was such
I had a thought and then it just flew right out of my brain.
It's okay. I just, as you said it, because you get sucked into this world of this Miyagi verse that we coined it, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I got State Farm as a sponsor. I'm like, oh, like, this is, they're in the real world too. Like, they got State Farm, like they're the real deal. But it was just funny because it just kind of like yanks you out in that moment, and it's so, the comedic timing of it is just great. And yeah. And
well, it was a really special experience. And if you're a guest star or a star of the show, so like obviously the stars are the stars, guest stars would be like Hawk and Eli, characters of that level. And then the rest of us are co-stars. So as a co-star, they'll just sort of email me a couple of weeks before they need me. I mean, that's what happened with season 3. And they just say like, hey, are you, we need you here on the 6th or whatever. And so you just figure out your life and go in and I'll get a script at some point pretty close to when I'm supposed to be there. So, I get the script and I read it and I'm like, oh my God, like I've got my own scene at Miyagi-Do. Like, this is just again, like such another amazing blessing, and another funny thing about that set is that I remember seeing it at the end of season 1, just like everybody else did. And being so surprised by that reveal. And then I saw the big 3 talk about it in interviews pretty recently after that. And that set didn't exist until they were getting ready to film episode 10. And they went to YouTube and they were like, hey, we still don't have the Miyagi house, and we kind of have to have that. And YouTube was like, you guys are out of money. Like, we're not building that set. And so I think it was Hayden, but one of them was talking about how they immediately like got on their computer and started Googling like Asian looking houses in Atlanta, or just like trying to figure out like what they could do to make that happen. And I think eventually they got YouTube to break off some money. So the Miyagi-Do house is a set. It's an interior and exterior set that is built in the corner of the parking lot at the Cobra Kai sound stages, which is just, I don't know. It's so, showing up there and seeing it is always cool, but actually being able to be in the backyard, I mean, that was just, again, like just another mind-blowing experience.
Yeah, that's like you said, that's definitely the place where you feel the spirit of Miyagi the most. So I mean, I can't even imagine. Like, it's always been a dream of mine to just be able to walk like in the backyard. Yeah. And I'm sure it was like, similar for you.
Yeah, it's like walking into the Millennium Falcon or the Death Star or something. It's just like not something I would ever have expected to be able to do in my life for a large number of really logical reasons, until they, continued the story of the Karate Kid, decided to shoot it in Atlanta and let me be in it. That's nuts.
I mean, yeah, it's awesome. And another thing that I find just really funny about your character, and it's not just you that does this, but everybody refers to Daniel as the 2-time champ. And I every time it makes me laugh, because Johnny is also a 2-time champ, and it comes up when Priest, I think, finally refers to, or maybe it's Bobby, someone finally refers to him as a 2-time champ. And it's like,
yeah,
the people forget, like, so it's just really funny, like that's how we, the committee references Daniel. Oh, the 2-time champ, the 2-time champ. He's not the only one. So where's Johnny's pull on this committee? Like, he won twice.
Yeah, you got to think that, like, well, first of all, I think that, and this is just me making stuff up, but I think that all of the committee has karate experience. That's why we're connected to the tournament still. We were probably in the tournament back in our days when we were under 18. And then we've just continued to support the, karate in the Valley over the years. Daniel is like a well-respected businessman that has also probably stayed connected, since he retired from the tournament, or he was no longer 18 or whatever. But obviously Johnny did not do that. So I think Daniel was able to like usurp all of that privilege and power and install that title on himself. Whereas, Johnny's sleeping in the bushes and whatever he'd been up to for 35 years.
Fair enough. And then I think that the last thing I want to ask you about Cobra Kai before we start to talk about you a little bit more is something that you say in that same scene in Miyagi's backyard. And it's about karate being, well, actually Daniel says it, like karate's not the real villain in the story.
Right.
So what are you, Matt's thoughts about that? Like, is karate the villain of this Cobra Kai series? Is that what's causing all these problems, or is there something else?
I don't think so. I think it's just there's just this giant general lack of communication. I remember my next door neighbor had been talking about watching it forever, and we've all had these experiences where you go like, oh yeah, Cobra Kai, gotta watch it. How do I watch it? It's on YouTube Premium. What the hell is that? I'm not signing up for that. So when it finally came on Netflix, there were all these people that had been meaning to watch it that finally did. And my neighbor binged it, and he was like, oh yeah, you were great. I'm a huge Karate Kid fan. So he started talking to me about it. And that was his main point, which I totally agree, that so many of these problems, now of course you have to have conflict for a narrative to exist, but so many of these conflicts could be very easily resolved if somebody just said, the thing that they were supposed to say. Like, I messed up, I'm sorry, or, you know, whatever. So the fact that the characters don't do that quite often, I think that's the villain. And then it's just, you know, cowboys have, you know, cowboy guns and horses, and everyone in Star Wars has laser blasters and lightsabers, and everyone in Cobra Kai can kick ass with, you know, badass karate. So I think it's, you know, karate is the way that the conflicts resolve themselves, but that's not the poison. It's the fact that these people just have these like really dysfunctional relationships with each other. Daniel and Johnny are both horrible parents. I mean, the fact that Daniel spends all of this time worrying about Johnny's son, meanwhile he has his own son that he pays no attention to. They ship him off to camps. He's got his head stuck in video games all day. You know, stuff like that. If Daniel were to have the epiphany that maybe he could be a better father to his own children, that would resolve a lot of, it would make, you know, it would cut you down to 5 episodes instead of 10, you know?
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that it's something that the writers of the show do a really good job of, is bringing up, I think, greater issues that are happening in real life. And communication is a really, really big problem with, you know, my generation. And we're growing up in a world where we don't know how to communicate with each other. And it is going to cause all of those problems that you're seeing. And karate is just the tool, the weapon of choice, as you say. And yeah, like I think it's forcing us to open up dialogues and have conversations with each other, because if we don't, like, we're all going to end up fighting each other, as we see on our screens.
Yeah, and all the stuff with the, you know, the love triangles with Sam and Robbie and all that. Like, if they were just, in Miguel, if they were just more forthright and honest with each other, then none of those problems would have arisen. You know, there's like, that was another point that my neighbor made. He was like, I like Sam, but she makes so many mistakes in communication and in her relationship. She's kind of a selfish character in some ways, you know, but she's also like, she's a kid. That's what kids do, you know?
Yeah, I think that's that's something important to kind of realize, is that the kids are kids. They're teenagers. And at 16, it's hard to communicate those feelings, and it's hard to make those decisions. And, you know, she's still dating Robbie, but he's in juvie. So did they break up? Did they not break up? She still has these feelings for Miguel. She kissed Miguel at the party.
Right.
Robbie forgave her, but are they broken up now? Like, what are they? And so he's gone, out of sight, out of mind. And she's not thinking about the repercussions of those actions. And I think because she's at the center of that triangle, it makes her the most unlikable of the group, which kind of sucks, because they're all making mistakes. Hers are just they're the focal point, I guess. Sure. And that would be
but you know, I'm the father of a daughter as well, and I think there's a lot to root for Sam. I like her character a lot. It's just that, you know, if you're gonna kiss somebody at a party, somebody else is gonna see it. Like, you should just like, everybody just knows that, you know. I mean, it's not just like getting caught, but like, if you've committed to a relationship, then you've committed to a relationship, and if you you know, violate that trust, it's not a good thing to do, you know.
It's gonna come back to bite you in the butt for sure.
Exactly.
It did. Real life. It happens in real life. It's gonna happen on Cobra Kai. That's definitely for sure. It's just an over-exaggerated Hollywood version of life. A very karate glorified version of real life. But I mean, like, it happens all the time. And even if you're not dating someone, if you kiss someone at a party, like, everyone's talking about it. And you have to deal with those consequences. You have to face the person that you kissed. And, like, these are all things that happen, and we all make these same mistakes. And I think a lot of people's problem with Sam is that they see themselves in her, and they see the mistakes that they made. And I know a lot of girls who are rubbed the wrong way by Sam when they're watching. And it's like, because you made those same decisions, and you look back on it and you're like, oh, I did that. Like, oh my God,
Yeah.
that's horrible. That's horrible. And then all of a sudden it translates to, oh, Sam is horrible. And she's not. She's a kid. Anyway, to summarize all of the Cobra Kai stuff, I guess my final question for you would be, what dojo are you in? Are you a Cobra Kai, a Miyagi-Do, or an Eagle Fang? Which is the best?
I mean,
by the way.
Yeah, it's amazing. Obviously Miyagi-Do, like that's my heart. But the show is called Cobra Kai. I love the journey that Johnny takes of like failed redemption. And he's always got his heart in the right place, but then something will happen that's out of his control, or some flaw within him will cause him to like screw it up at the last second, or maybe not totally screw it up, but not get the A+, but sort of eke out a C+, because of flaws that are just within him. And it's obviously like his dad's a total jerk, and he's obviously had like a very rough upbringing. And then Eagle Fang is just that's just so amazing. And I got to learn about Eagle Fang in the script for season 3 that I got, and that was a secret that I had to keep for over a year. And I didn't even tell my best friend, who's like he's just as big a fan as I am. He's also an actor. He keeps auditioning for the show. He's like, oh my God, I want to be on this thing. But yeah, Eagle Fang was amazing. But yeah, my heart, Miyagi-Do forever. Mr. Miyagi. I mean, come on,
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. I'm very excited to see what becomes of the merger, because I think that would definitely be where I fit the most when it comes to a dojo. But I want to use this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, and let the fans get to know you a little bit better. So we were talking about before, you were talking about The Office, the American Office, and how great of a show it was, but you actually got to work with Steve Carell.
I did. I got to do it I was in for a day. And then the film's called Irresistible. It's on HBO now, and pay-per-view and all that stuff. But it was written and directed by Jon Stewart, and so I got to hang out with Jon Stewart for the day, and Deborah Messing, and Topher Grace, and a couple other people, and they were all amazing and kind. And then Kurt Yee, who plays George on Cobra Kai, was also in that. So we got to hang out together on the same day. Again, guys in suits talking about guys in suits stuff. So that was really fun, and it was great to work with Steve. He was very kind. He was very reserved, very quiet, which isn't something that I expected. But then when I was reading that book about The Office, that was something that had been echoed quite a bit as well. So he was just very, very focused on the work, not really into goofing off a lot. But then once the cameras rolled, it was almost like he was reserving that energy and that magic and those thoughts for when it counted, but he was great. Very, very nice guy. So was Jon Stewart. And it was a really exciting project to be a part of. And they used a ton. I mean, they shot it in Georgia. They used a ton of Atlanta folks in that film. So it's one of those ones, another Atlanta actor will be like, oh, I finally watched Irresistible. Hello, blah, 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 list off like 20 names of people that were, they got to be in it. So yeah, that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, I had never realized how much of a hotspot for acting Atlanta actually was until, all these shows and movies started to come out, and it was like, oh, Atlanta. And I was always like, what is this magical city in Georgia that everybody just seems to act in? But there's actually a really big theater scene there too. And you were saying that you had been involved in theater. So what draws people to this city? What is so special? Tell me, you live there. What is so special about this place?
Well, as far as theater goes, obviously there's theater in, the West End in London and on Broadway in Chicago. And obviously those are like the 3 big places in the world where theater is. But really, it's everywhere. Any small tiny town is probably going to have a little community theater or something like that. And then cities like Atlanta or Houston or Boston, this sort of cities that are sort of on the second tier of American cities have it's called regional theater, but they have like their own big theater scenes, and actors work there. The reason why, so we've got a really great theater scene here in Atlanta. And I was doing theater most of my life. I got my first film and television agent in 2015. And after a couple of years, as I started to work on camera more, I've started to just sort of transition into this world a little bit more, for a myriad of reasons. But really, it's, the pay's better. Honestly, it's easier. And not that I don't like the challenge of doing a play, but it's less stressful. The time commitment is smaller depending on the project. And then another thing I like about it is that people will actually see my work. Like if I do something like Irresistible, 20 years from now, it could pop up that I was in it. Somebody could find it and watch it. That's the beautiful thing and the heartbreaking thing about live theater, is that once you do, it's ephemeral. Once you do a play, once it's over, it's over. Somebody could have recorded it or taken pictures of it. It's not the same. You could remount the same production with the same people 2 years later. Not the same. We're all different people. The air is different. So, when you are part of a really great live theater piece, it's just something that's really exceptional, and healthy for the soul. But once it's done, it's done. The reason why so much stuff is filmed in Atlanta is because Georgia has this really great program of tax incentives for productions. So it's cheaper for a production to take all of the directors, the stars, everybody, fly them all over here from LA, put everybody up in hotels and Airbnbs, rent all this stuff. It's still cheaper to do that than it is just to shoot in LA. And we've got these tax incentives in Georgia. There are other states that had tax incentives and they dropped them. So North Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana all dropped or reduced their tax incentives like 6 or 7 years ago. And so we just absorbed all of that work. So the cost of living here is cheaper. There's great tax breaks for production. And then on top of that, we've got space for infrastructure that Toronto, London, LA, New York, they full. They don't have room. If you are trying to find sound stages in LA, it's going to be insanely expensive and hard to find. Whereas here, if you drive 10 miles out of the city in any direction, there's like these industrial areas that have these warehouses and stuff. And so they can just come in and rent a big ass warehouse and build sets and use that as their sound stages. So and the infrastructure here is growing. So that's why so much stuff is shooting here, is because it's cheaper. The second that those tax incentives go away, production will go away from Georgia too. But they seem, knock on wood, they've seemed really safe over the years. So we just hope we'll continue to grow.
Wow. I mean, I'm not an actor. I don't know any of that stuff, and that's just so interesting, and it explains why everything is shot there.
Yeah.
And where there's so many amazing productions happening there. But you weren't always in Atlanta. I know that you spent some time at the University of Alabama, which for me, as a sports fan, I have to ask you, did you get to go to some football games?
Absolutely. Yeah, roll tide. I went there for grad school. I was there 2009 to 2012. And we were able to get, as students, so I couldn't get this for my wife, but as students, we were able to get home season ticket packages for $50. So that's 5 games or 6 games or something like that for $50. And they had 2 student sections. One is like down, on the front rows. But a lot of those seats would get taken up by the fraternities and the sororities because they would send pledges really early in the morning to hold those seats. So as soon as the stadium opened up, they would flood down there and fill up those sections. So there's another student section like up in the like the third level, and that stadium, Bryant Denny Stadium, holds over, I think it's 106,000 people or 108,000 or something like that. So when you're up there in that upper student section, you can actually see the curvature of the earth on the horizon. That's how high in the air you are. But yeah, we went to a bunch of games. I went to there was only one Iron Bowl that I got to go to in the 3 years that I was there, because they alternate between Tuscaloosa and Auburn. So my second year was the Tuscaloosa home Iron Bowl, and that was the one that Cam Newton won, like basically by himself. And I can't stand that guy to this day just because of that, because I watched him destroy the Crimson Tide right in front of me. But yeah, we went to a bunch of
so many
games.
reasons to like or dislike Cam Newton, and that's
exactly.
I love that.
Exactly. Everything else just made me hate him more. But I mean, it was just such a cool experience. Things have changed a little bit since I've been there, but when I was there, I think at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday, if there was going to be a home game on Saturday, they would shut the campus down. All the campus cops and workers would zip out in all these golf carts and block off all these parking lots and stuff. And then the tailgaters could start pulling into the quad and setting up. And the quad there is huge. And so they would start setting up their stuff, their tents, satellite dishes, TVs, grills, tables, like all the things. But then they were setting up TVs and stuff, so no one wanted to leave their stuff there overnight. So they were the campus would fill up with like 10,000 adults on a Friday night that would just hang out and party and get ready for the game the next day. But they all slept there because they didn't want to just abandon their expensive equipment, or they had stuff on the smoker. They needed to be there all night. So it was like Mardi Gras. Like the streets were just full. The stadium seats over 100,000 people, and then they usually had somewhere between 40 and 60,000 other people that weren't even going to go into the stadium. They were just on campus to tailgate. So it's just this really exceptional experience. And then on top of that, it was always so fun to watch the freshmen come in, because they're freshman theater majors. Like, they're not football fans. Like, they're, it's just very exceptional that you've got a sports fan that's a theater person too. Not that they don't exist, but the freshmen would come in and would be like, oh, it's almost football season. And they'd be like, what? Like, look, trust me. Do you like hanging out with your friends? Do you like hot dogs? Do you like yelling? There's like lots of, you don't have to care about football, but this is really, really, really fun. And then you'd watch them, after they had seen a couple of games and watched Alabama just beat the crap out of, a couple of teams. By the end of that first year, they were huge football fans too. And so, then the next year they would be sophomores saying, oh, almost football season. Here we go. It was so fun. So cool.
I love that. I love the environment. I mean, I go to a big ACC school. I go to Syracuse, and I feel like
nice.
We're more of a basketball school, I guess.
Sure.
You know what? We're more of a lacrosse school, let me tell you. But tailgate wise, we're definitely a basketball school.
Yeah.
And as Notre Dame and Clemson really took off in the last few years, football has become really important in the ACC. And it's been so fun to kind of watch Clemson really, really become this amazing football school. So on Clemson Day, like, the whole world is out and about, because tailgating for men's basketball is a lot harder because it's always snowing in Syracuse.
Yeah, weather's terrible. Yeah.
So I mean, like, the tailgating experience for me, I feel, well, first of all, I miss it. I miss being able to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I had always wondered what it was like at a school like Alabama, or a school like Clemson, where it's always just gorgeous out, and you can tailgate whenever you want, and it doesn't matter that it's cold in October in Syracuse. Like, you're not tailgating, or you are, but you're freezing.
That's what I was just about to say, is that the weather in the South in the fall is just, it's perfect. I mean, I don't mind the heat. So like when it's hot in July and August, like, I'm fine with that. But once it starts to cool off, the fall just lasts forever. I mean, even when winter starts, it doesn't really get cold down here until December. It's cold in like January and February. and it's cold. It's not Syracuse cold, but it's cold. You got to wear a coat. It's cold. It gets down to around, freezing at night or whatever. It's in the 20s and 30s during the day. It gets cold. But man, a fall semester in the South the weather is just divine. So on those football Saturdays, it's like 68 degrees outside, skies, the air smell, smoking meat and victory. It's amazing. It's just fantastic.
You make me feel like I made the wrong joke. I'm just such a sports fan, so it's nice to talk to someone who, you experience one of the biggest sports schools in the country, or the biggest football school in the country. It's so cool to just have lived an experience like that. It has nothing to do with acting, but it's just an incredible life experience that you got to have.
There were so many great experiences about that. I mean, I went to get my master's degree in acting. My wife and I had we started our family there. Both of our kids were born there while I was in grad school. And when I was auditioning for grad schools, I had gone to a couple of different conferences and I just went out and did like a big cattle call for a whole bunch of schools all at the same time. And then it got called back by some schools that were interested in me. And so Alabama was one of several on a list that were looking at me, and I was looking at them. But thankfully they called first, and financially it was fantastic. The training was fantastic. The opportunities that I got through that school still continue to be fantastic. I've gotten to work off Broadway twice through the University of Alabama. Those weren't things that would happen if it weren't for the head of that acting program, Seth Panich, and his initiative and drive. So many great things that are connected to Alabama in my life. It's another just pinch me, I'm dreaming. How did this happen to little old me kind of thing,
I mean, yeah. For all the Cobra Kai fans that don't like sports, I'll move on. I swear, I just had to know. But you've played a lot of different roles, and you've done theater, you've done film and television. If you could play any role, dream role, what genre would it be? What kind of role would you play? What is your favorite thing to do?
It's a huge question with many answers. I still love doing theater, and I think I've alluded to a lot of reasons why it's special to me. And there's just something that's incomparable with really like touching an audience or making an audience laugh because you were handed this really great joke and you just landed it perfectly, and you can tell, and you're joyful, and you're with these other hundreds of people that are all joyful, and you're all together, and it's this amazing communal experience. So when it's good, it's really good, but it's also a huge time commitment. Even I'm in Actors Equity, which is the stage actors union. So there are like pay minimums and stuff for me, but even then it's a lot for the financial gain. And then, I'm in a regional theater situation. So it's like really 100% impossible to make a living just as a stage actor anywhere except for New York or London or Chicago. And even then it's pretty tough. If you're a chorus person, or if you're in the ensemble of Broadway shows, it's a decent pay, but you're also living in the central Manhattan, in the near the theater district, probably, or hopefully, or whatever. So it's just tough. But that being said, there's a play written by he's also an actor. It was a playwright named Sam Shepard. He wrote this play called True West in the early 80s or late 70s. It's about these two brothers that sort of transform into one another, and it's really funny and gritty. And I've always wanted to do True West. And in recent productions, the last time it was done on Broadway, it was John C. Reilly and somebody else. I don't remember, but they did what the original cast did. It was Gary Sinise and John Malkovich when they were really young. The actors would flip roles. So one would play one brother and the other brother, and then the next night they would reverse and play each other's roles and just sort of flip flop, that way. So I would love to do that. And then I'm not old enough yet, but later on in my life, I would love to tackle Death of a Salesman. I think that would be an amazing challenge and an amazing experience. But that's 20 years into the future, Matt, not right now. So.
Well, I mean, you lost me on the first one. I don't know anything about the first play you were talking about, but Death of a Salesman, I definitely read in high school, and I actually read it. Fun fact, everyone, I actually read it, and I loved it. I enjoyed it. There's a Yellow Card song out there that references that play, and that's why I read it.
Nice.
That is the only reason that I read that play, but I'm glad that I did, because it actually not only clarified the Yellow Card song for me, because that was important in my 16-year-old brain.
Sure.
But I mean, it's a really amazing play, and it actually was, I think, the first play that I read all the way through that wasn't Shakespeare, in high school, and made me say, oh, theater is cool. Like, plays are cool.
Yeah.
It's not just all like tragic deaths and like horrible killing each other for the love of it all, and like, because Romeo and Juliet is like the thing that everybody remembers reading in high school. Sure. And I was sitting there going, they're gonna die because they love each other. Like, are we?
Yeah.
Come on.
And
Let's get more interesting.
That's a huge challenge. Yeah, that's a huge challenge in theater education. I don't know if it's just specific to the US. I'm kind of guessing it might be. That theater by and large is not incredibly important to, like, I don't know, you could say half of the country, maybe more, or some people have had some experiences, like their grandma took them to see Phantom of the Opera, they saw Wicked when it went through town on tour or whatever, but they've never seen something that is really like up their alley, something that is they could really get into. So first of all, a lot of people don't realize, like, if you're into like really dark, edgy, indie stuff, there's plenty of theater out there in your town that is doing that. If you like big, brassy musicals, you can see that too, and everything in between. And then when we're asked to read these plays in school, we're not getting that stuff. You're not getting like these cool gateway plays that teenagers would really, really like. It's like, we're going to read Much Ado About Nothing. Like, this is your introduction into the art form. And I think it kind of throws a lot of people off, or, The Crucible or the Streetcar Named Desire. Not that those aren't all amazing plays. They're perfection. But if that's your first experience and you're 13, that might not be the best angle in,
At 13, you definitely don't get it. And I remember, like, my brother coming home one day from school and being like, oh yeah, we're reading I think it was Romeo and Juliet. He's like, my teacher made me wear a dress today. Like, he made me be Juliet. And I was like, well, you're not going to get this kid to get into it and enjoy it if you're forcing him to play Juliet. Like, he's not going to enjoy his time. Like, you have to relate to kids. And I could go on and on about some of the flaws in the school system, but I'm not going to.
Sure.
That's not what we're doing here. But I do
exactly.
think that it took a specific play for me to acknowledge that, like, theater is interesting, and there are plays out there for everybody, and there are characters that you can relate to. And when I'm playing the wife in The Crucible who is pregnant and I'm 13 or 14 and I'm trying to relate to this character, I'm not relating to her at all. I have no idea. I know I'm going to track practice in the afternoon and going, ha, I'm pregnant, and everybody looking at me funny. And it was like this great joke. I like walked around all the time for like 3 weeks while we were reading the play. Every day I'd be like, oh, I feel it. I'd walk through like the hallways like that. And I thought I was funny because I was 14 and I thought that was funny. But
it sounds like it was fun.
It was funny. I loved getting, weird looks from people and having to explain that one. But that was I needed to not be the class clown all the time. But I loved English, and I loved reading all the books that we read. And when it came to playtime, that was always like my least favorite unit. And I think it was because there was so much Shakespeare, and I didn't want to read about all the tragedies. I wanted to read something, something that taught me something that wasn't just about love. And that was what Death of a Salesman did for me. And it was, something that it wasn't always just, love based. There was family elements, and it was about, a person's identity, and that meant something to me. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. We got very, very off topic there, I think, but I don't know. That's probably my fault. Once they start talking about the theater, I feel like I have to defend the fact that I wasn't interested in it in high school, and now I would like to be, and there aren't a lot of avenues to be. I think, and I wish people would open themselves up to more new experiences, because when you do, you might find something that surprises you. And I don't know.
I mean, I've taught. I'm also a part-time professor in the theater department at Kennesaw State University. And fun fact, the Marietta campus of Kennesaw State University is where they shot the season 1 tournament. They shot that in like a basketball practice area, arena, room, whatever. But I teach theater appreciation at Kennesaw State. And so these are conversations that I have with my students quite a bit. And a lot of them, this is a gen ed requirement. So most of my students are not theater majors. Almost all of them are not theater majors. So they're taking this elective because they have to. And a lot of times I'll get an email that'll say, like, Professor Lewis, I meant to turn this thing in, but I had chemistry, and I was really focusing on my real classes. So can I turn yours in late or something like that? But the thing, I get it. But the point that I always try to make is that, let's say, you might say you don't like theater, right? But you could also say, let's look at music. Like, that's an art form with fewer barriers. Most people listen to and enjoy music in some capacity in their lives. But let's say that the only music that you ever heard was your high school orchestra twice, and that's it. Those were your music experiences. If that was it, then you could easily say, like, yeah, I don't like music. It's just not for me. You have no idea. Your well of experiences is so small that you don't know what you like. So to say that you don't like theater because you had to go see your girlfriend in Guys and Dolls when you were 13, and that was really bad, and then you were in New York one time and you saw Cats, and those are your two experiences. That's not enough information to make an informed decision.
Yeah,
so you just got to get out there and see stuff.
It's a really, really good point that I think people should take into consideration. The comparison to music, it really put it into perspective for me, because music is probably the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you only heard Lil Yachty and then like your high school orchestra, you'd be like, what is this music thing? What is happening? But then
so
in my opinion, then you hear Green Day or Led Zeppelin, and you're like, oh yeah, there's that too. There's something for me out here. So there's something out there for everyone.
Yeah, the point that I always try and drive home is that, by the end of the semester, I hope that there's just this little alarm that will go off in their souls every once in a while, just like it happens with live music, sporting events, good restaurants, other culture, going to a museum, whatever you're into. But every once in a while, most of us go like, man, I haven't seen a concert in quite some time. Let me get online, figure out who's coming to town. I'm gonna go see something. Or, I haven't had eaten in a nice restaurant in a bit. Like, let's go get some good food. We're good. And so hopefully that same thing will happen. And every once in a while they go, man, I haven't seen a play in a minute. let me, get online, see what's playing, find those theaters that you like and see what they're up to and go see something,
Yeah.
We do that with movies. You can do that with theater too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since anyone's seen a concert or a play or a movie in a movie theater or anything of the sort. But I like to keep it really positive. So can
Sure.
you tell me the best thing that has come out of this year of COVID and isolation and the pandemic?
I don't know.
Think positively. That's what we do here. We want to find something.
I mean, I think the fact that just being able to witness the strength that my children and that my wife have found, and other friends and stuff, but this being really specifically isolated at home with my family, they've just been so resilient. And my wife and my son both have asthma, so as soon as this thing started, like we locked down, I guess late February of last year. Like I saw, I guess today they're saying today is like the official anniversary of the lockdown, but we had already been locked down for a couple of weeks, and then like you couldn't get toilet paper or Lysol, and all that. It just went south real quick. But yeah, I think just knowing that, like, and especially now that we can start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, just knowing that like we saw an insane amount of challenges all at once, and we were able to face them and grow as a family. And as far as I know, my wife and I are still going to stay married after this, and our kids are doing okay, even though they're like in stupid Zoom school every day, and it's just there's so many things about it that are just ridiculous. So we've made it through. My wife got her first shot today. I got my first shot yesterday. So yeah,
family for me I think was the most important part of it as well, because I mean it happened in my junior year of college. So I'd been gone for almost 3 years at that point, hadn't really been home a lot, and it was forced, but I went home. And during the pandemic, I got to spend a ton of time with my family. I got to spend a ton of time with my grandpa, who unfortunately passed away in September. And I would never have spent that much time with him in this year if that hadn't happened. And so I got to spend 10 times more time than I would have. And so like, in a way, like I'm grateful that I got to spend so much time with my family, and it has caused us to start sorting out some of like the long-term issues that we had in our house. And
right,
now we're doing construction in our home as a family. We're moving into my grandpa's house, and so we're redoing everything. And here I am,
nice.
a senior in college, and I'm like, I could be doing Zoom school from my apartment in Syracuse, or I could come home to Long Island for a few weeks, pack up all my stuff, help everyone move, and here I am making that choice. And I never would have thought I would have made that choice, a year ago. Coming home was not on my radar at 20 years old.
Sure.
And a year later, I feel like I've aged 5 years.
You and me both. Yeah.
I was like, it's like, oh, gray hair. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. No. But I mean, we had to do a lot of things in this COVID world. And I just like, forcing people to look at it from a positive perspective. You will see this positively. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I think the best thing that anybody could do is always look at everything from a positive perspective. And
yeah, for sure.
Weird for me to say, because again, a year ago I would have been like, oh, this sucks. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And now everything
there is
there is
things seem like they just keep getting better every day. So that's really great.
Yeah. So is there, speaking of things getting better and better and light at the end of the tunnel, is there anything that you're working on now or have worked on recently that we can look forward to seeing you in?
No, I mean, really, because of the pandemic, anything, hopefully I would have booked some stuff, over this past year. And there were a few things, some small commercials and stuff that I had done right before the shutdown. But then there was just no work for a really long time. So anything that would be like on right now or like 3 or 4 months down the road didn't happen. But that being said, if you're messing around on the television trying to figure out what to watch, there's Irresistible, written and directed by Jon Stewart, starring Steve Carell. It's on HBO Max right now, and then you can also stream it from the normal places. I did a film with Natalia Dyer a couple of years ago called Yes, God, Yes. That's on Netflix. It's an R-rated film with lots of sexual content, so it's not for the kiddos, but it's a fantastic film. It was an amazing experience. I got to spend, I think, 2 or 3 days with Natalia. I played her dad, so all my scenes were with her. Written, directed, produced, and even a lot of the crew, all women, which was amazing. What else? I was in the first season of a TV show called Raising Dion that's on Netflix. It's a fantastic show. It's geared towards kids and families to a certain extent, but it's a cool sci-fi comic book story and great for all ages. And and there's, if you're interested in watching other stuff that I've done, you could always look me up on imdb.com. But yeah, those are some things.
Yeah. And then just tell us, where else we can find you, where can we keep up with you, find out new stuff that you're working on, all your social media, where do you post all your information?
Like I said, I'm on there, but a lot of the bells and whistles and stuff I'm not super good at, but I'm on there. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I'm not on like the newer things, the things for the 10 years from now when all the old people get on TikTok, that it's lame, and the kids will get on something else, which is what happened to Facebook and what's happening to Instagram now. But yeah, I'm on those things. So, if you're so inclined, there I am.
Well, I will have them linked in this in my description of this episode of the podcast, so that everybody can make sure they go and find you no matter how active you are, because we want to keep up with where you're at and new projects that you're going to be in that I'm sure will be just as amazing as the ones you have been in. I did watch Irresistible, not knowing that you were in it
nice.
when it first came out, because I was a big fan of The Office, so anything Steve Carell is in.
Well, and another
really
cool
good.
thing about, and another neat thing about being able to do that is, I'm sitting right there. Steve is standing behind a desk, and I'm right there. And that was the first actual scene with more than one person that shot on day one. There was one other scene that Steve shot by himself, but it was literally just him like opening a laptop and looking at it or something. So this was like the first scene. And so Jon Stewart came in and he was like, all right, this is here we go. This is day one. It's our first thing. So I'm going to stage this scene. We're going to rehearse it a little bit. We'll start shooting the rehearsals. And then once we're all nice and comfortable, I wrote the thing, so I can do whatever I want. We'll just come in and change stuff, and I'll throw you lines, and we'll ad lib and have some fun, make a movie. And we were all like, okay, so I'm going to improvise with Steve Carell. This piece of cake, no big deal. And so we did what Jon said. And then as we started to get more comfortable, Steve I made the blooper reel a couple of times because Steve just like threw stuff at me, asked me some questions. He was like, this guy's so powerful. Would you kiss him? I was like, yeah, I would totally kiss him. He's like, I'd kiss him too. And there were a couple other things that made the blooper reel. So having that experience was really cool. And then just watching Steve Carell go, I mean, he would do the scene as it was written. He might ad lib within that framework or whatever, but he would basically do the thing. But then he just kept going. And until he made himself laugh, or Jon, you could hear him off in the other room, just be like, oh, okay, all right, cut. And then we would all laugh. But it was like The Office, basically, like that sort of style of improvisation and lightness. And you could tell that, they were throwing a lot of ad libs in there at each other. So that was just another like incredible experience of working with Steve.
Oh my God, it sounds so amazing. And I just want to
It
say
was.
thank you for coming on here
Sure.
and chatting with me. It was, I mean, I had a blast. I hope you had fun.
I did.
But yeah, I really appreciate you being on here. You're my very first Cobra Kai cast member that has come on here to talk to me.
Nice.
So I'll
Firsties.
always remember
Awesome.
this one as the most special. And I really
Well, hey, no problem, anytime, and feel free to reach out to any of the other Atlanta locals that are around. Like, everyone is just so willing and able to hang out with you guys, and we collectively really sort of pride ourselves in being open and accessible to the fans, because we're fans too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I look forward to seeing everything that you do in the future.